My name is Mariah. I'm turning 45 this summer. I live with my 92-year-old granny. Granny is both physically and mentally in great shape, living each day peacefully. I owe so much to her and my late granddad. They're the ones who raised me after all, but something happened that exploited my gratitude, and it was like a nightmare. Today, I want to share that story with you. I have an older sister named Christine, who's 3 years older than me. Christine is brilliant and skilled at everything she does. My parents had high hopes for her, enrolling her in all sorts of activities with enthusiasm. In contrast, I was always shy and never talented. My parents were noticeably distant with me. I still remember the time my parents and Christine started to act as if I didn't exist. Eventually, Christine got accepted into one of the top middle schools in the country. Due to the commute, the whole family decided to move, except they didn't take me with them. Instead, they left me with my grandparents, Granddad and Granny, who lived in the countryside. By that time, I was already used to how my family treated me. I was more relieved to be away from my family than sad. My grandparents welcomed me warmly into their home. I made good friends at school and enjoyed every day. After high school, without any specific goals, I decided to move to the city and find a job. I got a part-time job at a clothing store, where I had good coworkers and enjoyed my work. Soon enough, I was put in charge of managing a store. In the midst of all this, I lost touch with Granddad and Granny due to my busy life. One day, out of the blue, my cell phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and even though the voice was raspy, there was no doubt it was my mom's voice. Let me tell you, joy was the last thing on my mind. Mom's words were empty, as she steered the conversation here and there. It was all fluff, with her obviously just trying to gauge my mood. Eager to end the chat, I mumbled some responses and hung up. Then, another call came in from yet another unknown number. This time it was Christine. Apparently, she still lived with my parents. She was fuming about me hanging up with Mom and starting laying into me. I had enough, so I hung up, and then Granddad fainted. I couldn't believe my ears. Cutting Christine's rant short, I insisted she spill the details. Turned out my granddad had fallen while working in the garden and was now in the hospital. Granny was with him, so nobody was at their home. I made up an excuse, ended the call, and tried to reach my grandparents' home. I couldn't trust a word from the family that abandoned me, but no one picked up. I had no choice but to believe them right now. I called Christine back, and it was clear she was still miffed. I didn't mention the fact that I called my grandparents. Instead, I asked where Granddad was hospitalized. Christine murmured something but didn't give me a straight answer. Instead, she said, "Granddad's medical bills are through the roof. Can you send us some money?" What happened to him? No matter how many times I asked about Granddad, Christine only talked about money. "We're the ones taking care of him. You, Mariah, haven't done anything, so you should at least contribute financially," she shouted. I'm livid, but she wasn't wrong. In the end, I promised to send them money.
"You're a manager, aren't you? You can send at least $1,000, right?"
Those were my dad's words. After all this time, the first conversation with me was about money. I was overwhelmed with loneliness and frustration and couldn't say a word. "We're going through a lot too, so remember that." With that piercing remark, my mom hung up. Why couldn't she just say she was sorry? Unable to control my emotions any longer, I ended the call. From then on, I started sending $1,000 each month to my family. Being a manager didn't mean I was rolling in money. Still, for the sake of my dear Granddad, I worked hard to make ends meet. My salary wasn't enough, so I took up a night job. After closing my clothing store, I would rush to my part-time job. I worked in a warehouse, picking orders until the early morning, then I'd go home. I would manage a quick nap of about 2 hours, take a shower, and dash out the door. Day after day, I worked almost around the clock. I would inevitably fall ill sometimes from pushing myself too hard. but it wasn't something I could share with anyone. I convinced myself it was my burden to bear, and I shouldered it alone. I gritted my teeth and worked like crazy just to send money home. Whenever I had a spare moment, I'd call my family to check on Granddad's health. Apparently, his condition wasn't stable. Sometimes he was fine, other times he was bedridden. They still wouldn't tell me which hospital he was in. Even if I knew, I couldn't afford to go there. In the end, there was very little I could do. Then, one day after living like this, I collapsed from overwork. I blacked out at the clothing shop where I worked, and the next thing I knew, I was lying in a hospital bed. I had been unconscious for about a week. When I woke up, a young nurse looked at me with a complicated expression. When I asked why, she awkwardly looked away. The nurse had immediately contacted my family after I was admitted, but no one came to see me. The nurse seemed to pity my situation. To me, it was normal, but I guess it's unthinkable for most people. Once I felt a bit better, I was allowed to use my cell phone. When the nurse handed it to me, it was turned off. When I asked her why, she said it had died because of the numerous incoming calls. Confused, I borrowed a charger and powered up my phone. There were over 100 missed calls, all from Christine. Startled by what I'd never seen before, I called Christine back, and then, "Where's the money?" From the get-go, Christine raised her voice in anger. Christine was furious because I hadn't sent this month's money. While I was in the hospital, the day I usually would send money had passed. I immediately apologized and explained my situation. Then she snapped. "I know you're in the hospital, but you can still send money." I felt a chill run down my spine. The nurse must have told her about my condition. Christine was demanding money, fully aware of my situation. What a terrible family. I just agreed on a new date for the transfer and hung up. 4 years after I started sending money, my beloved granddad passed away. Or rather, he had already passed away. I found out about Granddad's passing through a phone call from a friend who lives in my hometown. Apparently, they found it strange that I hadn't attended the funeral and decided to give me a call. Yes, I had been kept completely in the dark about Granddad's condition. I learned about it a month after the funeral had already taken place. During that time, I was still sending money. Struggling to come to terms with my feelings, I called Christine. "I've been busy with my wedding, so I couldn't get in touch." Really? That's her excuse? I wanted to lash out at Christine right then and there, but I felt all the strength drained from my body, and I collapsed onto the floor. Half of me was devastated by Christine's attitude. The other half felt relieved that the money transfer was over. I no longer wanted to talk to Christine and was about to hang up the phone. That's when she casually said, "By the way, Grandma fainted." At this point, my anger exploded. "Stop lying!" Before I knew it, I was shouting. Then Christine retorted, "If you say it's a lie, go ahead and stop sending money. What do you think will happen to Grandma if you stop sending money?" It was almost like blackmail, but if Granny really had collapsed, what could I say? "Tell me which hospital she's in." "All visits are suspended. No one can see her right now," she responded. I couldn't trust Christine's words, but I also had no definitive proof that she was lying. "You, a high school dropout, should just keep sending money and keep quiet." Laughing, Christine ended the call. From then on, no one in the family would pick up my calls. But on the scheduled remittance day, Christine always called to say, "Send the money quickly." Before I realized it, 20 years had passed since I started sending money. I am now over 40, completely missing my marriageable years. For 2 decades, my life had been nothing but earning money. I've collapsed multiple times, forced myself back up, and sprinted through days in a daze. All the sacrifices were because I wanted Granny to get well. But I've hit my limit. That day, I took a break from my night shift. Returning home from the shop, I crumpled onto the living room floor. Just when I thought I'd drift into deep sleep, the doorbell rang. I felt like staying in bed, drained from exhaustion. But I couldn't inconvenience the delivery person. Dragging my weary body, I managed to get to the front door to receive the package. I locked the front door and then found myself collapsing in the entranceway. How long was I out? I woke up lying there in the entryway. A package had fallen in front of me. Who could it be from? The moment I glanced at the label, I sprang to my feet in surprise. There it was, Granny's name, but she was supposed to be in the hospital. Upon closer inspection, the package was shipped from Switzerland, and right beside Granny's name was a phone number. Desperate, I grabbed my cell phone.
Hey, Mariah, how are you?
The voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in over 20 years, a comforting one. Granny, are you okay?
I've been fine all along. What's wrong?
There was no trace of illness in Granny's voice. I spilled the last 20 years to Granny. What I learned shocked me. It was true that Granddad had fallen ill, been hospitalized, and passed away, but since they were already wealthy, there were no concerns about hospital bills. My family never sent them a dime. Granny told me more about my family as I listened in disbelief. Christine, who was treated as a golden child, failed to secure a job after graduating college. Since then, she bounced from part-time job to part-time job, supported by my parents. They'd spoiled her so much, they couldn't even control her anymore. They now had their eyes set on Granddad's inheritance. Sensing this, Granddad transferred all his assets to Granny while he was still alive. After Granddad passed, Granny moved to Switzerland to visit some friends. It was to prevent a family feud over the inheritance. I had been swindled by my family for 20 years. Upon hearing my story, Granny was furious on my behalf. She promised she would help me. A few days later, I got a call from Christine.
Hey, where's the money?
Christine's tone was as aggressive as ever, but I calmly asked her back, "What did you do with my money?" Christine was obviously shaken.
We're using it for Grandma.
How, exactly?
Stop pestering me. What's with all these questions all of a sudden?
Sensing something, Christine handed the phone to Dad.
Mariah, you shouldn't upset Christine.
All I want to know is what happened to my money. Talking about money, I could tell Dad was also trying to hide something. His voice gave it away.
Don't worry about it. Acting all high and mighty with your $1,000, you high school grad.
So, should I stop sending you money? As I said that, Dad suddenly started to panic. You could tell just by his reaction. Christine quickly took the phone back.
Stop sending us money? Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding.
You don't care what happens to Grandma?
Yeah. My response must have shocked her, because Christine's voice was trembling. Go ahead, stop sending money if you dare. All right, will do. I cut her off and hung up. Christine continued to call me, but I never picked up. Half a year passed with this back and forth. It was a calm day. When I opened the window, a slightly chilly breeze came in. It felt like the beginning of fall. I stopped answering my family's calls, so now they're trying to reach out to me through social media and text messages. They seem desperate to get in touch. The messages were the same from everyone, so I reluctantly called.
Hey, what have you been doing all this time?
Christine was shouting, just as I had expected.
It's hard to take care of Grandma without your financial support.
Whoa, that sounds tough.
What's with that attitude?
When I sarcastically responded, Christine exploded even more.
We had to take a $30,000 loan because of you.
That's unfortunate.
You're the guarantor, so make sure you pay.
Christine seemed a bit more relaxed, but her threats didn't work on me anymore. That's fraud, isn't it?
No one knows who signed it.
I'm not even in America now, you know.
Well, what?
Christine lost it on the other side of the phone.
If you don't provide the money, that's going to affect Grandma.
Affect who?
Granny, who had been listening to the conversation on speaker, joined in. You could hear the silence on the other end.
You three have done something awful to Mariah, haven't you?
No, it's not like that.
Christine defensively responded, her voice strained. In the background, my parents were screaming.
You'll be paying back that $30,000.
Granny said, and then hung up the phone. The day after reconnecting with Granny for the first time in 20 years, I was busy preparing to move to Switzerland, breaking off ties with my family and living just with Granny. That was Granny's idea. Retirement paperwork went smoother than expected, and within 2 months, I was on my way to Switzerland. Sometime later, I heard from my relatives. Apparently, my parents reached out asking to borrow money. Turns out, Christine had squandered all the money I'd been sending. But that wasn't all. In addition to the $30,000, Christine had racked up more debts without telling our parents. Now they're struggling to pay it back, and the situation seems pretty bleak. However, that's no longer any of my business. Despite the very challenging years, now I live with my beloved Granny. I'm incredibly happy now, and we spend our days filled with laughter.